It's day 76, part B. Last time we talked about how buying a t-shirt kills a grizzly bear, or basically how buying anything kills something wild. And that's why I'm wearing a secondhand shirt. Not too shabby. Woohoo! This part, of course, says to offer you a little bit of hope that it's not all doom and gloom. Humans can actually come with great ideas, too. You can see here that I have a mako shark, my guy shark, as they say down in New Zealand. And that's why, of course, the Maori, now that it means speed, because they're the speediest shark. They can go like 35 miles per hour underwater. They catch tuna, you know? What a Ferrari of the sea. And this guy, Michael Phelps. Now, these two have something in common. They spend way too much time in the water. He's got really big flippers. They call them feet. And they're really speedy. And, of course, that's because of a wonderful thing called biomimetics. So I would like to know what biomimetics is, do what we classically do in biology, and dissect the word, and it should make it easier. Take a swing at it, and then we'll help each other out. It is, of course, one thing that can supply us with hope for the future. Cool. Now, let's take it together. If we look at this, of course, the secret to all biology stuff is to dissect things. That means big words, too. Chop them up, right? The first part, of course, is bio. And by now, you hopefully know that bio means life, living stuff, things like that. Then the other part, of course, is this thing called mimetics. Now, mimetics comes from this idea of a thing called biomimicry. So mim is actually coming from mimicry. And the other thing tied to this, of course, is biomimicry, which is what we're talking about here. It's a fascinating topic, or at least I think it is. If we look at biomimetics, mim is mimicking, it's copying. And then anything that is an etics, like genetics, plate tectonics, and stuff like that, it's kind of like it, or as a technology or a process that we can use to figure things out, right? So this is called life copying technology. It's basically biologically inspired technologies. Technologies, of course, are humans using fancy tools and stuff and ideas to get things done easier. Or what I like to think of it is, it's another term for it, is basically stealing ideas from nature. Now, there's a cool thing about this. Nature has been doing its thing for, like 3.2 billion years, maybe even 3.5, some scientists are saying now. So it's been pretty good and tested, vetted many times by natural selection. Only the best designs have a chance of surviving in the environment that's currently there, or at least a good enough design, so they can get really, really picky. It's like doing multiple billions and billions of trials. Biomimetics is the idea of taking that wisdom of nature and applying it to human problems, copying some of the ideas of nature to be more efficient at doing our technological aims and solving problems, which is the other part of your issue topic. That's why I very much want to get a PhD in biomimicry once I, kick the kids out and have time to actually think. Now, cool examples we can take of this has to do with Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps figured out what a lot of people figured out, what Speedo figured out. They figured out one of the fastest things in the water is sharks. And sharks are so fast because their skin is covered with teeth. And the teeth, of course, set up these little ridges that actually reduce the resistance in the water so they can flow through the water with very little friction. They took that idea and they created an artificial. They biomimicked that pattern and put it on Speedo suits, and suddenly people kept breaking world records like crazy. It's because, they're fast, but they were faster because they had less resistance. Eventually, the Olympic Committee decided, hey, that's not really fair, and it's not really fair to the record holders before. You can't wear those anymore. But still, it proved an awesome thing. We could copy an idea from, say, 500 million years of evolution, sharks, and take that idea and apply it to human problems. And just imagine if we took this low-friction idea and we stuck it on the bottom of boats and could ship things around with less resistance and move faster. Or we modified it slightly and put it on the skin of an airplane because that's just traveling through a different fluid. Or we put it on your car. Oh, wait, we could actually reduce how much fossil fuels we put in the atmosphere by lowering resistance in a fluid. Hey, not a bad idea. Maybe we should put it in our pipes. Wow! Don't steal that idea. That's mine. Cool things about this other applications is they were looking at these things called humpback whales, and they noticed that on the actual pectoral fins of humpback whales, they have these weird bumps. They're called tubercles. And like, why do they have that? And it turns out they also reduce drag. They reduce resistance by creating a bunch of little tiny eddies that basically allow that huge flipper, which allows them to, turn really fast to catch a bunch of fish because they feed on those. Allows them to turn it without a lot of resistance on their fin. And they started to apply that to these things called turbine blades. And by mimicking those, they were actually able to greatly increase the efficiency of the blades, which are huge, and make more electricity. Whoa! It's like stealing an idea from nature. Imagine if we put that on the front of propellers for airplanes and helicopters. We could do great things. Or another good one, we live in the land of Boeing. And if you look out the window at any airplane that you've been on in recent years, maybe not right now, you'll see these little winglet things. And those little winglets, of course, were stolen from the ideas if you look at things like different types of birds, especially condors and soaring birds like vultures. This is not one of those. This is a flicker. You'll notice that they have their wing, but the edge of the wing always is broken up in this pattern and it twists up. That's because it allows the airflow that as the plane cuts through, it's going to create a little tiny eddy, basically, that's going to create a bunch of low pressure. And if you can guide that farther away from the wing, you're less likely to slow down the plane in that low pressure system so it can fly faster and save fuel. They're even getting further and putting a double winglet on it so it can go in both directions as it does that, reducing the friction from the air. You can see on the back of this, they also mimic the back edge of the wing of a owl because they're super silent because they break up the air. That's why the flights are much, much quieter and more efficient because the air flows through, creating little eddies. We can also steal this idea, of course, from things like the caudal peduncle on stuff like the tuna. That caudal peduncle, the little bone that's there, allows them to break up the resistance and slide through the water quickly. They're moving through a fluid. Hey, that could save like millions of dollars for an airline in a year on fuel costs, right? Now, other really good examples of biomimicry is lily pads. They've noticed for a long time that you look at lily pads in a pond and like dust collects and stuff and things get covered up. If you ever looked at your car, it's all covered with pollen. But lily pads always look clean. And it's because at the microscopic level, they have these little tiny bumps all over the surface of them. And those bumps allow for the dirt basically to be held up. And then when water falls on it, it's hydrophobic and it actually collects the dust and then runs off and cleans it. It's a self-cleaning, high-efficiency system so that the solar panels, all those chloroplasts, are always exposed at the top of the lake and you can get lots of sunshine and you don't have to grow a new leaf. And some people figured, hey, houses get dirty. Maybe if we put these little beads, which they unfortunately use plastic beads, which microplastics have other problems, but if we use something that was more biodegradable, that'd be awesome. Basically, they created a paint that stays bright. It's called Lotus Sun after the lotus, the lily pads. And basically, every time it rains, it cleans off your house, which is kind of awesome. Imagine if we put that in bathrooms and on our cars. Or our clothes so they always stayed nice and fresh with just a rinse of water. Or really cool things, if you look at that butterfly's wings are super iridescent, which all the little bumps on it help it to clean too, but it actually makes color with no pigment in that part. It just uses little tiny crystals, basically slits in its wing that bend the light. They refract it at a certain wavelength in each spot, which refracts and gives off the blue color and absorbs the other ones and lets them through. They are actually designing new cell phone systems that do the same thing, and they save a lot of energy, which means your battery can last longer, which is a huge succubus on our economy because we keep, eating up our energy systems to run all of our silly little games so we can like things. I'll tell you what I like. I'd like a screen that I can see in the bright of day and I don't have to turn up the light or hide it with my hand because it actually is brightened by the sun. Whoa! And there's no electricity required to do it. Pretty cool. Other ones, of course, that are a little more simple, well, not so much if you're trying to climb a wall, would be like stealing the idea of the geckos. They climb the walls because of the van der Waals forces. All these little tiny setae on their skin allow them to increase their surface area, bumps on bumps. If we mimic that, we can actually create creatures like fake geckos that can climb the walls as well. But imagine the other properties of this. Imagine somebody doesn't want to die cleaning windows of high-rise buildings, or they put solar panels up on a high-rise and they constantly need to be cleaned because dust collects on them. You could have tiny little robots using van der Waals forces to climb up there and clean them regularly. You could run them on solar panels. Or you could affix things to the outside of smooth surfaces without any nails, and then you could have houses that were changeable in their design, especially with high rises and things like that, right? Or one of my favorites, this is an idea that came out of the United Arab Emirates, and also I've seen one. I stayed in a hotel in Nairobi in Kenya, where they basically mimicked it on the idea of a termite mound. Termites have this awesome setup that they just evolve and they model because they live in a really hot place and they can't turn on the air conditioner. What they do is they create a series of channels, and they always build themselves. So you see the ones in Namibia, they're always shaped like a shark fin, basically, and they always point downwind. As the wind comes along, it creates a low pressure system right up here, and then colder, denser air will sink into it, especially at night. That pushes in and basically exchanges the air for them, bringing oxygen and cooling air in. And then the CO2 and the hotter air that the colony is going to create goes out, and they don't cook that way. Keeps the egg chamber a nice, steady temperature. Hey, that's like air conditioning with no energy input. They basically copied that idea in the hotel in Nairobi I was in, and in the UAE, because they wanted to host some soccer there for the World Cup, and they designed a bunch of ducts so that basically you can have cold air rush in, the hot air rises, and then wind would carry it away with low pressure. Pretty awesome idea and a great way to save a lot of energy, and then that means you can make more profit off renting out your buildings, or not paying for your electricity bill, because one of the major things that's sucking down the energy on Earth is that humans like to live in places where they really shouldn't, like deserts or Florida or California, and they're constantly running the air conditioner in the summer just so they can fake like they're up in the north, in colder areas where we are better at surviving with our sweaty skin. Not a bad idea. Other ideas you can get from this great show, it's called Making Stuff Wilder, and normally I'd show you in class. It's by Nova. It's got this really annoying guy. He's kind of Mr. Science-ish. And these cool beasts like things by Boston Dynamics, Ox. And you should check it out because it gives you some good ideas like how you could turn viruses in the ocean into batteries, or make a suit that actually is made out of proteins from the slime of a hagfish. Very interesting stuff. I bring up those things as one part of your eco-issues topic, which you're going to feed to me your 3 top choices by the 26. I would suggest you do it before that so that you get the first pick of the things, because once one's taken, it's gone. Is one of your jobs was to use and figure out how you could use biomimetics to actually solve some of these major problems. And I'll tell you, nature is good at solving problems because it's been doing it longer than us. So some people are starting to figure out this thing called innovation is one name for it, biomimicry. It's basically stealing ideas from nature because nature's good at doing stuff, such as they wanted to process some of the toilet supplies, the fecal matter that was coming out of hotels in this place in Tahiti. And what they did was they built a whole wetland that surrounded it like you naturally would have with mangroves, and all the feces would go through that, or at least the toilet flushings would go through that. The water would escape, and the roots of the plants, the bacteria that were there, would grab onto all of the fecal matter, break it down, turn it into soil, and make a bunch of lush fruit and vegetables. And then the clean water would go out to the reef. Crazy idea, and it's beautiful. So people could stay at the hotel. That's just one example. There's tons of examples of how nature has already solved these problems if you just pay attention, and then you can tweak it up a notch and make it up to our human standard of speed, right? So, key things that we should notice, of course, you're going to create both the Screencastify and the Google presentation. Hopefully you recognize what biomimicry is. It's copying ideas from nature. And that would be a great idea because one thing nature loves to do is it loves to recycle. So it doesn't tend to make things that last really long, like PCBs or plastic shirts that don't last too long, especially when we consider that stealing or building those things is stealing from nature every time we make it. Every time you buy something, it's basically destroying something natural that actually keeps us alive. But, someday people will figure that out. So enjoy some biomimicry and take a look at nature because it's way better at solving problems than us. But if we pay attention to it, we can add to that and get better at solving our own problems that we create.